Okay. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today at RHE Podcast. This is Isaiah Diesel, joined first and foremost. Thank you so much for joining me. Enter Mr. Josh Enter.
Close, Josh Entner, but I'm not that worried about it.
Okay.
I think everybody pronounces it wrong, so it's kind of a running thing I'm going to go across the whole internet with.
That was actually totally intentional, but yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. I was trying to think of some kind of clever joke to say about you, but I couldn't really.
You're about at the level I was when I was in like first grade and didn't know how to spell my name right. I just looked at the enter key. So like you're at a first, but I appreciate the effort.
Yeah, I was trying to. Yeah, I just want to share some on the inside. You had said you'd gotten a little bit offended at one of the jokes I said to my last host, which is your friend, Mr. Leonard. But hold on. But I said what I told you behind the scenes was that I told him I'm going to insult you right at the top just to break the ice, and so don't take anything personal. But that being said, yeah, again, want to thank you for joining us today. Entner, is that right?
It's close enough. I'll respond to it.
And okay, Josh. Okay, I'll just go by Josh. Like that name, nice and easy. All right. So first and foremost, I always start off with a friendly fire round, and so because you do a podcast on film, we're going to focus on that one. So right off the top 3 movies of all time. Personal favorite.
Oh, that's
what kind of dog you got, by the way?
Oh, that's a German Shepherd. I'm sorry. She seems to join me on almost every single podcast that I go on.
Cameos.
Yeah, she's definitely the biggest. She's been on more than my actual co-host has been on. So,
all right.
Top 3 is very easy. It's RoboCop, the original, Total Recall, the original, same director, and then First Blood with Sylvester Stallone. Best 3 movies ever.
Total Recall is definitely my top 10.
It should be.
I did not know that those are the same.
They're both Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah, I'm a huge sci-fi guy, so we can get a little bit more into that. But okay, we got second one is if you had any anime character as your best man, who would you want to have?
See, anime is not really my thing. Anime is not really my thing. So like, closest I can say is I enjoy Final Fantasy VII a lot, so I'll go with Barrett. Seems like a cool guy to hang out with, so I'll go with him. He's in a movie.
I know that's a bizarre question, but okay, here we go. How about if you could be a member of any family sitcom, preferably in the 80s or 90s, but I mean, you could go with the 2000s.
Family ones are hard because I like the ones with the friends better. See, I like Married with Children, but I don't like the family dynamic there.
Actually, I was going to say that one. I was going to say that just because the mom is so hot.
She is. She doesn't get the respect she deserves. I'll go similar because they're rich and it'll be a nice place to live. I'll go with Ed O'Neill's Other Family in Modern Family.
Okay, Modern Family. All right. I never saw that one.
I'm more a Cheers guy. The family stuff isn't quite up to my speed.
All right, here we go. So, and this is the big one right here. If you were going to get killed by any fictional horror character, who would you want to die at the hands of?
Oh, Jason. I'm a big that's my comfort film. I'm a huge fan of the Friday the 13th series, and he'll mostly do it quick as long as I don't wait towards the end. I gotta be one of the first kills where he's just taking care of business. I can't be one of those later ones where he's like squeezing the head and then the eyeballs are popping out.
Oh god. Was it Jason Takes Manhattan? That black dude is like punching him. He's a boxer. And then he knocks off his head. That's hilarious.
That's the worst Jason movie, but that scene's pretty ridiculous in a fun way.
All right, here we go. This one's a little bit awkward. Okay. But if you got stuck on a deserted island, who would you trust to get you off of that island? Any action hero?
Oh, it'd have to be Rambo. Like, he's resourceful.
Okay. And if you got stuck on that island for the rest of your life, what action hero would you like to spend the rest of your life with on that island?
Oh, it definitely would not be Rambo. I can't imagine the conversation would be very well. I probably would go Linda Hamilton.
Like, oh yeah, there we go.
She's hot, but like in a strange way. And then like honestly, she's tougher than me, so she'd be taking care of me.
She'd take absolutely. There you go. Actually, we might talk about this, but the Terminator franchise is my favorite of all time. So I'm a bit biased towards Linda Hamilton.
Me and my co-host had done like RoboCop versus Terminator because that's his favorite franchise, and I'm all RoboCop.
RoboCop, okay. I just a personal preference that I have. But okay, here we go. Last one. Greatest movie soundtrack of all time.
Greatest movie soundtrack of all time. I'm gonna be cliche. It's gonna be a John Williams, and I'm gonna say Indiana Jones. Or do you mean like the music or not the score so much?
Just whatever.
Because I never really liked the music in the score.
Don't get pedantic. A personal favorite I have is, which is also one of my top 5 of all time, which is a Vanilla Sky. I really love that one. Or Braveheart. Can't really go wrong with Braveheart. But
those are actually 2 movies I've never seen, which makes me a terrible person never seeing Braveheart. But I don't know, like Mel Gibson, I go for buddy cop film.
Oh my God. You literally got to be like the first person on this planet who's never seen. I didn't even know there's a person like that, but okay.
Yeah, and I have a movie podcast too.
Yeah, I know, especially, so it's a double whammy for you. But yeah, you should definitely check out both of those. What's the other? Vanilla Sky is a masterpiece. But okay, so real quick, if you could give me a 2 or 3 minute introduction on 1, your channel, 2, what else you do as far as the skeptic community, and then also just your, I guess, whatever journey, wherever you rate on a spectrum, theologically or whatever.
All right,
if you could do that.
Yeah, my channel is more fun than anything. Like I'm focused on the 2 genres of film that I care about the most. We call it the only 2 genres of film that matter: action and horror. Because I'm not as big into dramas. Comedies are fine, like Wayne's World's cool, but we try to just like dig into those. We try to look up factoids and just like have a good time, like trying to recreate the feeling of like watching a movie with your friend and just talking with it over beers. And we've gotten a couple people from the skeptic community to come in there. Kenneth has done 2 episodes. He did Kenneth Leonard, who was on here last. He did Tango Dash and Point Break with us. And then, but outside of that, I've started doing some skeptic shows. I originally just started as a guest on some of my friends in the skeptic community because I mod some of the ACA fan groups. So I became friends with them. And I started doing like, I did some guest spots on Skeptic Hangout, nonprofits. I'm doing my 4th episode later next month. I'm just trying to like, I'm actually starting. I'm going to be joining a skeptic podcast real soon, but I'm not allowed to announce what podcast I'm joining. But it's going to be announced later this month because as much as I love talking movies, I do have an interest in like talking about the skeptic community, which I've actually had a few episodes where we talked about that kind of thing on my podcast. But I wanted to do more, and I'm definitely. I call myself agnostic atheist, in where I can't disprove every single God out there, but I'm pretty sure that there isn't a God. But there's no way that I'd be able to.
Pretty sure. Wow. Okay. All right. Well, maybe we'll touch on that one later on. Yeah, we are going to have an opportunity to talk about both film and God, and maybe there might be some bleeding over. So,
that's how I do my podcast.
Let's get right in this. I did give you the questions in advance, so you did get a chance to look those over, correct?
Yeah, I wrote like a paragraph for each of them that I won't be reading off, but just got the idea in my head.
Yeah, I went over you were recently on Objectively Dan.
Truth Wanted. Is that right? Truth Wanted. It's his show, but there are a couple. There's a couple other hosts now.
Oh, okay. It is okay. I didn't know that. There was the Wendigo or Wendango.
Well,
I saw.
She's not a regular host. Every week he gets another like guest on there from the skeptic community, but there's like 4 rotating hosts that are on there regularly with the new guests.
All right. So without further ado, we're just gonna hop right in here. Sure. And you ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right. Oh, by the way, just one quick thing. You had mentioned doing factoids. Any chance you ever see like he's from the UK, it's called Minty Collections or something like that. And he does like the top 10 things you didn't know about certain movies.
Is it this bald guy that usually is wearing like
Yeah. Glasses.
I
Yeah.
couldn't think of the channel, but it just came in my recommendations, and he comes on all the time. He has good information.
That guy. Well, because I'm a film buff, that guy is incredible. I highly recommend that to people. I was just watching some. Any chance you ever saw Event Horizon?
Oh, I've seen Event Horizon. I'm one of the
Yeah.
few people that's not a fan of Event Horizon.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna pretend you didn't say that, but he talks about all the back stuff that's going on behind the scenes in that movie. Um, just the political and stuff. Like they had to rush it through because Titanic was taking too long, and it's interesting.
There's like a whole scene that's like everybody's trying to get where it showed like basically the footage from the other ship that was basically them in hell that we got like I think 5 seconds of in the actual movie, which honestly if they could expand the whole scene I might change my opinion on it because it's not a terrible movie, it's not a great movie to me.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, that's another thing I saw about that one because I actually love watching those kind of
behind the scenes,
where they're giving you information. Yeah, they're giving you information. But he said when the because they had to shoot it because of the studios are tied up because of Titanic, they had to go to the UK to shoot this, and so the studio wasn't there to micromanage them as much. So when they actually saw the film, they were like horrified. They're like, "This is way too dark." So they had to edit out all kinds of scenes. Even at that, it's insanely horrifically like it's one of the most horrific movies I've ever seen in my life, honestly. But okay,
I think it's tame to me because it was built up so much that it didn't quite meet the standards. Maybe I'll look at it again without the high expectations.
Yeah. All right. Without further ado, I want to ask you the first question, which is, what have you learned while doing a podcast on movies, and why choose this topic?
I'm not sure if I have like a deep answer for this one. Doing a podcast on movies is just something that came about when me and my friend, who's now my co-host, were arguing whether there are good sequels to Psycho. There are. So it just came from that. We have good conversation on this. I bet we can expand this into like a 45-minute podcast, and we ended up being able to do it. I think I've learned to speak a little better on which I'm saying as I'm stumbling over my words. Because I wasn't so good at like doing public speaking of any kind, even on the internet. So like the early episodes are a little bit more awkward, but like I've gotten stronger in my voice. I think that's the biggest thing I could say I've learned. And it's mostly I'm just a nerd. I'm passionate about things that don't matter.
You look like a nerd.
Yeah, that's why I got the glasses. Movies don't matter, but they're excited to talk about. And like nerd culture is big right now. I got like all this nerd gear back here behind me. I got this alien pod from the movie Alien. Like we're in a generation where you can actually like go nerdy and you're not like women running away from you. The girl that I'm seeing right now, she loves
my God too. Well, look at this. People like Elon Musk, the nerds of the past, the Gates, they run the stinking world right now. So it kind of pays to be a nerd at this point. But I do want to ask you something because you are a fan of horror, and I do want to ask you if you think that that's a dangerous genre to. And let me elaborate a little bit more. I do. Any chance you're an MMA fighter?
No.
MMA. No. Wow, that's a bizarre question. A fan of MMA. God.
I like the movies on it, but I'm same way with boxing. Like I love boxing movies, MMA movies, but I can't actually watch the sport. I'll look for the highlights.
Yeah. So I follow it quite a bit, but like objectively speaking, and I've said this on this podcast, if I'm being objective, like I have to say this is not something that's really good for like society, to have people bashing each other's faces and like that. It kind of desensitizes you to violence, in my opinion. So do you think that there's any of that with the horror genre that I know you probably might point to Quentin Tarantino because he's had a lot to say about this, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think that watching movies makes people violent. I mean, I'm speaking as one person, so I can't speak for the majority of the world. But all the things I've looked at, it's people that already have something off in them that are going to go into violence. I've never been in a fight in my entire life. Like the movies that I watch are action and horror. All the violence is there, but I like just seeing the creativity on how they do the violence. I know it's fiction what I'm seeing on the screen. So like when Jason folds somebody in half, I want to see how they do that kind of thing. I don't go on to see like, oh, I want to fold my friend in half, which I don't think would be pretty successful either, even if I tried it. So like I don't think they inspire violence. There might there's a movie I'm blanking on. I might say it'll inspire you to do your violence better, but if you're already gonna be violent, I think you're just gonna do it. I don't think movies are gonna make you do it.
Okay, that's an interesting take. I can't remember off the top of my head. Like sometimes people make bad correlations between things. So, for example, they were these sociologists were studying like kids who were young and sexually like active, like in their early teens or whatever, and it found that very frequently they were listening to really sexualized music, which, as you know, there's a lot of that these days. And so
I was going to say, how do you avoid that?
Yeah, so they're like, you got to be careful about making the assumptions that they're listening to the music, so they're going out and having sex, or it's more than likely the case that they're interested in sex, so that's the kind of music that they're attracted to.
It could be either or like you'd have to like figure out all the variables in that study to see if anything like that even matches up. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how exactly you drew out all the variables because there's so many. Sex is everywhere, and I don't think sex is necessarily like even a bad thing. So like, as long as I'd more be happy about if they're teenagers and they're just having safe sex with each other. That's what I care about more than the fact that they're listening to music that's pushing for sex. I just want them to have the education to, if they're going to be doing it safely. Right.
That's reasonable, because even as a Christian, I'm really against the abstinence only type programs, because that just that's not realistic. It doesn't work. As I've said it on this podcast, you could implant chips into kids that's going to kill them within 5 minutes of them having premarital sex, and every week, and you're just going to be sweeping up dead bodies. That's just a brutal reality. And if you've never been 16 years old, well, everyone has, but it's like literally what?
I skipped it.
But literally at that age, I mean, it's hard to think about anything else than that. Like literally, if it's like, are you thinking about sex? Like, no. Are you thinking about anything else apart from just sex? So that's
I think
it's being realistic.
I think teenagers have everything on their mind. Like sex is on their mind a lot for sure. But I think we like to downplay their intelligence because they're dealing with stress of homework, stress, like they don't know how to deal with the real world. So that sex is definitely a thing. They're trying to get the girl, but I don't think acting like all that they are is sex is a whole other story. I want to give them a little bit of credit, although teenagers also tend to be kind of dumb, and I was a dumb teenager.
Yeah,
but you're all over the place. But
how old are you?
I'm
by the way?
35.
35. Wow, okay, I'm older than you. I look at you. I've already lost all my hair. But you had a name for me. What was your name for me?
I was gonna call you Dominic Toretto, but you already went with Diesel.
Diesel.
I guess you got the Disturbed thing going on too.
Oh, Disturbed. Okay, I've gotten that. I got the earrings here. So they used to call me Mr. Clean in the when I used to install solar panels.
I'm too messy. I'm too messy to come out with Mr. Clean. I'm not familiar with those products.
Yeah. So okay. So there's a lot I could say about this. One thing that people have also said is that video games can make you violent, but I live in South Korea, and if there's any kind of correlation there, I swear you could walk outside of my building right now, and within 5 minutes, you'll run into like 5 different PC rooms that these guys go in there. They spend all day just playing video games, and South Korea is one of the safest countries in the world. So it's like, if that were the case, South Korea would look like South Central. But you don't see that, so it is a little bit hard for me to take this line of argument seriously when I live in South Korea. So
I think it's more likely violence comes from people needing stuff, not having enough stuff. So video games, if you're able to afford video games, you have less reason to be violent, I think. So I'd really have a hard time saying video games are what's making people violent when everybody is using video games, and the majority of the people, they just want to kill people on their screen.
I see. All right. So going over to number 2, do you think that film can be used both positively and negative in shaping people's view in society?
Oh, definitely. Like I watch a lot of Chinese martial arts films, and those movies are heavy propaganda. Like you look at the Ip Man movies, I felt like a proud Chinese citizen after I watched those movies, and I hated white people. So like I get they're great movies. You just got to understand that the propaganda. And I've watched Christian propaganda, and I've had a problem with that. And if you're only getting exposed to the propaganda, it's going to shape the kind of person that you are. If you're like watching Kevin Sorbo all the time, you think he's where you're getting your moral messages from, I'm going to think that you're going to shape out kind of bad. But I'd say most entertainment is kind of benign. Like you might get like a Michael Bay film where they're waving the American flag and you like get a little overly patriotic, but I don't think it's like sending a message as strong as like the kind of movies that I listed are definitely more in the propaganda arena.
So I do want to, maybe you're going to be a little bit too young to remember seeing these routinely as a kid. I don't know, maybe not, but do you remember Saved by the Bell, like the original?
Yeah,
the original, right? So, one of the things is that show was really popular among young people, obviously, like teenagers and
Kelly,
younger. Yeah. It's so much so that they rebooted it with the same characters like 30 years later, which is insane. But sorry, that last line. I was just thinking about. Yeah, no, I was thinking about it because the new one's so funny. But anyway, the old version, the director, I think his name was Peter Engel. He was out doing some of these tours. They go to malls and meet and greets and stuff, and he saw how many young kids were there, and talking about how much they looked up to the people in the show, and that show specifically, I'll say that they incorporated a lot of liberal themes into it. But they dealt with it in a very subtle, if not almost impossible to like just pointedly blink, see out. For example, they were doing they dealt with reparations in a really roundabout way because Jessie, who's like this extremely liberal, there's no conservative message going on there. It's Jessie. She's extremely liberal. And she finds out that her ancestors were like slave traders. And then Lisa finds out that her ancestors they worked in the Underground Railroad freeing slaves. And so Jessie feels like extremely apologetic to Lisa, the African-American girl and teenager. And she's just kind of like, she wants to do all this stuff for him. She's like, what, you didn't do any of that stuff? Like, that was your ancestor. She's like, and if you don't stop, I'm going to kick your butt. She's like annoying her. And so it's in a roundabout way dealing with the reparations issue. And they did a lot of environmental stuff like that. And I'm probably sure you remember Captain Planet. I didn't realize how much propaganda that was back in the day. But maybe it can be a good thing, and it could be a bad thing as well.
Get Out, for example, was a good conversation starter for social issues. Like I went and saw that with actually one of my friends was black, and I'm like, I've done some of this white guy stuff that's in this movie. Like,
what you got yourself thinking?
The most embarrassing thing I could think about after I saw that movie, which I was dating a black girl like a few years before then, and like Obama was still in office, and I said like, is racism that bad for you anymore now that we have a black president? And I'm amazed she didn't break up with me right there. Just like my ignorance there. So like, Get Out exposed a lot of ignorance for people, and like that's good. Like entertainment can shine a light on some issues, and just like I'm seeing a representation of like all sorts of gay, trans, black. Well, there's already white. I almost said white. Just like all over the place, we're seeing more representation in things. Like even if it's not in the book, it's good to see that representation so people can see like themselves as the protagonists in these stories. Because I've gotten that. Like I appreciate anytime there's like a metalhead character in a movie, like, oh, they like the same music as me. I'm identifying with this. If I can identify it on a level that's as superficial as the main character's music choice, the ethnicity and like the embodiment of who the character is gonna be good representation for like gay people see themselves on screen, trans people see themselves on screen. Like if something's so minute about somebody as their musical choice means something to somebody like me, there's those more innate characteristics are going to be a bigger deal for other people.
Any chance you've ever heard of a man by the name of Ryan Calhoun?
The name rings a bell, but I can't.
He is a former NFL player who was gay in the NFL and like hid it till many years after he got out. But he was talking about growing up, Matt. I went through that book 3 times. I cried so much reading when he talked just about his self-hatred and stuff. And literally, he didn't even like, he never even engaged in a relationship till he was probably like 30 years old or something, because he kept this so hidden from I mean, it is a tragic story, but he did talk about one thing that was like really powerful for him growing up was whenever Ellen DeGeneres had came out, and he said like even though she was like in a totally different world than him because he's like from the Midwest, she's way in California, that it was like empowering to him. And it's you mentioned trans, and recently on the Saved by the Bell reboot, there is a trans person on there who's having like a documentary made about them, and the person is really trans in real life, and it's basically, the documentary is something like, do you ever see any of the I Am Jazz documentary?
No.
It's a series. It shows the transition of a young trans person, but the point being is that maybe people who are struggling with that area, seeing someone who's functional and on
like
TV,
they don't always have to be a villain is what it is. Like they're like Ace Ventura used to be the main representation they got, and that was not good. Ace
Ventura and what's the
Sean
other
Young.
one? No, the one that they were parodying in that movie, the Crime Game. That one was really.
I haven't seen.
You see that one?
No.
Really?
I know of it, but I honestly don't.
I have a hard. I'm losing so much respect for you, like movie wise, because take the God equation out to that for a second.
I have no interest in that movie. Honestly, there's just like
it's really good.
I'm not a big drama person.
You're not. I take it out of history.
Oh, go ahead.
I would say that movie was really controversial for several different reasons, but one of them was the fact that the guy, I can't remember what movie he's off. It'll come to my head later on what movie he's from. But the main character, I know it's okay. Forrest Whitaker gets kidnapped by the IRA in that movie. I mean, so you have like this whole other messed up background story. The transgender issue comes up later on, but it's like the initial plot line is Forrest Whitaker gets kidnapped by the IRA, and they're trying to like, okay, no, maybe I'm butch. Maybe Forrest Whitaker's in the IRA. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But somebody's in the IRA, and someone gets kidnapped. The Irish Republican Army, and someone gets kidnapped. It has a pretty messed up like background.
I gotta say, you didn't really sell me on the movie very well.
Oh, it's good.
I don't know.
At the ending is incredible, but it's like wow. But it's good. I'll just say that. We can move on, but it's a good movie.
I'll take it.
It was just really controversial, very controversial back in the day. All right, so what are your thoughts on changing a moving climate, such as one with Me Too, the streaming, and then just more indie movies being able to be, used to be back in the day, you needed to have sex with someone like Harvey
Yeah,
Weinstein, whatever.
his name doesn't matter. He sucks.
Whoever he is, yeah. But things have changed a lot. There's a lot of ways to get crowdfunding, and you don't need to, like there's avenues like YouTube. You ever heard of this Darman guy? Guy has billions of views, literally, and he makes Monday through Friday. He releases a short film.
Oh, that's cool. I haven't heard of him, but I'll look him up.
The guy has you would. I'll look him up right now. How many views he actually? This guy has like probably in the tens of billions of views. So it's maybe like 4 billion views. I'll tell you right now. But there's a lot of different avenues for that. So how do you think that's changed the movie?
Well, the first part, I appreciate what's happening with the Me Too. I appreciate that we're calling out people for that, and I think it's starting. I'm hoping that this also starts like more of a wave of like strong female fronted movies, because of it, where they don't have to deal with an a-hole like a Harvey Weinstein, and that they're not pressured to do nude scenes.
You can say asshole for that guy, by the way.
Okay, asshole like Harvey Weinstein. Like, and they're not pressured to do nude scenes that they don't want to do. I do know some actresses take pride in that, like Barbara Crampton. She takes pride in her nude scenes. She'll even like brag about them on her Instagram, and that's fine. I'm not against nude scenes in movies, but I don't want women to feel like they have to be.
They have to do it, right?
When they don't feel comfortable do it, especially if they sneak it into their contract later after they've signed up for it. So I like that people have women's backs better. And even Terry Crews benefited from that, and like he was able to call out his sexual assault.
Really, yeah.
So like everybody's more open to this, and I occasionally everybody likes to say like you'll always believe the victim, but you'll never you'll call somebody guilty before the trials happen. But I think that's a very minimal chance of happening. It's not the majority of these people. They're getting so many allegations. I have a hard time not believing them. So like, yeah, it probably happens, but the majority of the people that are dealing with Me Too, that are sending out the accusations, they're looking for justice. There are people that take advantage of it, but I want people to be able to get justice, because they have not been able to get it for the majority of the time. That part, I'm all for the Me Too movement. As for the streaming area, I do worry a little bit about theaters. Like there's articles all the time about theaters are going to be phased out because everything's moving into streaming, and nothing really beats the theater experience.
Yeah.
So, and like I pay for AMC
streaming
plus. So it's where you can see like 3 movies in the theater a week. And so like,
really, how much do you pay for that?
It's about $20 a month. So it pays for.
I was going to say that's in the first week.
It pays for 1 Dolby screening right there. So like, and you can see like the big.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous of you.
It's worth it. And when finally things got, we could go back into the real world. That was like my favorite thing that happened. I could finally go back to movies. I do worry about losing those, but also I do appreciate that a lot of the low budget stuff that I like, because I'm a fan of B movies. I'm a fan of the dumbest.
You like that?
Fine. So like the low budget stuff, I have an appreciation for that, especially in horror. That's where they're really able to do well with the low budget. Like things like Blood and Guts are surprisingly cheap when you hear about these budgets, and they're able to make a lot of money by selling it into streaming and getting it out there. So like it's been great for the horror movies, especially Shudder is doing great for streaming horror movies.
Shudder.
But
I've seen it.
I worry that we're all eventually just going to get down to the Marvel movies in theaters, and that's like my favorite genre is action, and we barely get like the old school 80s style action movies.
Yeah,
everybody's always wearing a super suit, which I like Marvel. I have a Spider-Man tattoo on my arm. Like I'm a fan, but I want to see real people kicking butt.
Yeah, it's called a spray and pray. Like Chuck Norris just comes out.
Oh,
you've seen like the memes about Chuck Norris.
Yeah,
other human beings have to reload. Chuck Norris does not need to reload. That's a rule, right? He does not need to reload. But you know what? I remember whenever Netflix came out about 20 something odd years ago, maybe like
It's been
25
that
years
long,
ago.
really?
Oh, it's definitely. I was in college. I mean, I was one of the first people to get it, like right at the beginning,
When it was
and it
just
was
the
the
disc?
greatest. Yeah, it was the disc, and they send it to you, and then like you can flip them around and send it back, and it was like I couldn't believe something was that. I couldn't imagine anything getting better, but I got to tell you, this is gonna sound so weird, but I'm so old school with that. I still like watching old VHS tapes. I feel like super connected to like touching it and actually knowing that it's playing in there. I feel like a bit of disconnect on Netflix these days, and I got to say, I'm probably one of the only people who misses the old Blockbuster where I could go in there and talk. Oh God, I'm so sad that is in these days is like is a business model that could never work. You know, it can never work for so many different reasons, but
I mean,
really miss those days.
I do streaming, but I have like somewhere around like 1,600 movies I'm watching. Just here,
Really?
I wish I had VHS because a lot of horror movie there is mostly DVDs that get some Blu-rays, but most horror movies you can hide the special effects like better in VHS because it wasn't so clear. The clarity sometimes ruins moments in the movies.
You know what? I don't know. It's just weird. I feel like I would rather watch the movies have those lines in it. Honestly, it reminds me of some nostalgia from my youth. So I feel like a bit of a kid watching it. So anyway, I think we're going to have to flip the switch a little bit.
Fine with me.
We're going from that to right into number 4. Do you think that atheism robs humanity of intrinsic value of life? That's quite a transition, right?
I mean, we go from movies to this. Yeah, I don't. I
buttered you up. I buttered you up.
Well, that's fine. Like I could go on and on about movies, but I also care about this stuff too.
Yeah, sure.
I don't see how atheism robs you of intrinsic value of life. It's one of those weird things that a lot of theists throw out there. I'm not saying you're like saying it. You're asking the question, but
it's probably also implied as well. It's probably a bit of a loaded question.
Like I'm sure you would side on that.
Sure.
It does, but I've never been a theist, so I can't really compare back and forth and go like my life had more meaning when I was a theist. But I find meaning in my life. I find meaning with my friends. Find meaning with all my loved ones. I find meanings in film and literature, and like I don't need a creator for that. I live in Los Angeles, or like an hour away from Los Angeles. We created that ugly city. That's what creators do. Like nature, the fact that came about through physics and just like happenstance, no plan. And it came out, well, it's beautiful to us because the evolution wanted us to think it's beautiful because there's probably some reason that helps us. But the fact that we can see beauty in that is awesome. The fact that I exist, it's just like I'm going to bring up one of my favorite books. It's Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. It's not the most original, but the execution is great. And it's where every single decision that you do, like me raising my right arm, there's another universe where I didn't raise my right arm, and that made its whole new thing. You go back like that through history. Like I don't think I was a plan. I don't think I was planned out. I got through billions and trillions of actions of just when it started from Earth, it goes even further back, have resulted in me just happening to exist. I think that's pretty awesome. Not that I would miss it if I didn't exist, because there's a whole trillion something years where I didn't exist. Yeah, I was perfectly fine with that. But the fact that I do exist and can appreciate it, I don't see what adding a creator would do to that. I think if I had a creator, I'd probably be covered in graffiti or something like that, like Los Angeles is.
You would be covered in graffiti.
I do have tattoos, so who knows?
I'm pretty sure I have more tattoos than you, by the way. I got them. I got all the world religions, all the paganism, and all the world religions on my.
I have the more important literature. I got Spider-Man and I got RoboCop. So
that's hilarious. Oh, you know what would have been awesome if you'd have done like a sleeve to where it looked like you actually. Have you ever seen one of those where it looks robotic?
Yeah, Terminator fans do that. I'm a RoboCop fan. I need a thicker arm in order to do a RoboCop arm.
And you need some muscles too, because
I don't have those.
Those would help. So that's a really good point. I think it's fascinating that you have never been a theist. You said that your dad was a Christian and your mom was a Jew.
Swap that. my dad's Jewish. Well, we say Jewish. He was raised Jewish. He went to temple when my grandma died to like try and pick it back up. But both of them, I would say, were like lazy theists.
Mhm.
So like they believed, but they didn't. They were never like churchgoers. So they left it kind of up to us to decide if we believed in either of them. And basically, if you're not, well, I'm not going to say speak for everybody, but for me, not being heavily indoctrinated
Mhm.
and religions came up, it sounded weird to me. So like, I religion never made sense. And then like I went into the skeptical communities, and they had even better arguments for why religion doesn't make sense than just me going like, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
Sure. And so actually, first thing, Bill Maher has almost the same exact story. His mom might have been Catholic and his dad Jewish. I can't remember, but she wound up leaving the Catholic Church because they were really against contraception.
Abortion? Oh,
Yeah, no contraception.
I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of Bill Maher. He rose me the wrong way, but I used to be a fan.
That's just the oddest combination, saying you're against both. That I don't even know what it makes, how to talk to someone who's saying I'm against both of these things. You know what I mean? Like the one thing that could stop the abortions, you're also against that one.
Yeah, I'm no. I said Bill Maher. I'm not a fan of Bill Maher.
No. I know. But you'd mentioned abortion. But actually, whenever
I think everybody should have abortions if they want abortions. I'm pro-choice. And I think safe sex is a thing. There might have been a miscommunication here somewhere.
I'm speaking about the Catholic Church. Like it's the definition of irony that they say we're against abortions, but the one thing that could prevent them, which is contraception, they're also against. So it's like you have something else that's going on here that's not. Something else is going on here, because if you're going to sit there and also talk about being some kind of arbiter of like children's rights and protecting children, and you go around and you shove around your priest like this, dude, like get out of here. I don't care what you have to say. I mean, I'm a Protestant. I really don't care what you have to say on any topic, honestly. But specifically this one, it's like they really blow it. They're really out there. Oh,
I get what you're saying. When you said you were referring to the Catholic Church, I thought I misspoke somewhere. You were talking about me.
Miscommunications happen.
Yeah,
but because I was wondering, I'm like, what are you talking about? I had a hard time. I'm like, where's he going with this? But okay, that's fine. And okay, so anyway, that was his story. That's quite a rabbit hole from. Anyway, he was a I guess he's just more of a skeptic. He doesn't really call himself an atheist. He's more, I guess he'd call himself an agnostic. He's really into skepticism. Yeah.
I thought he was an atheist. He did the Religious movie, which when I was doing my edgy atheist days, I ate that crap up. But
that was my favorite movie, like as whenever I was an atheist. But he doesn't, I mean, he's like what I'm selling is doubt. So it's like, if you're being honest, there's no real way to be an actual like hard capital letter or hard atheist. Soft atheism makes more sense, or agnostic atheism, at least that makes more sense. Right? Would you agree with that?
Depending on the god, there are some gods that I believe you can rule out if you interpret their books the way that they believe they're supposed to be interpreted. Like if you believe everything that happened in the Bible literally happened, I'm gonna say I don't think the God that did all those things definitely exists. I don't think that at all. But like if you're gonna say there's a God, like what is it? I'm blanking on the word for it. I think it's
deism.
Deism. If you're gonna say there was a God that created something and just went off somewhere, I can't disprove that.
Yeah. I don't
think it's reasonable to believe it without evidence, but I can't disprove it.
I mean, I'll be honest. I think that is one of the most bizarre. Like, I find deism to be worse than atheism personally. I used to be an atheist myself, and I briefly was in a camp of deism, and that just came about because I was just being intellectually honest with myself, and me being in South Korea and going into North Korea, it caused a really big crack into the ceiling of my atheism, and I had to like unpack it there for a while, and so it put me into like for a while into a camp of like a deism until eventually I did actually find God myself. But that being said, it's like that is just one of the weirdest positions. Like I don't understand why somebody would actually hold to that view, you know?
I mean,
It's
I
just
definitely
like
don't think it's a reasonable or skeptical position. It's just an impossible one to disprove.
it's a yeah, there's that. There is that, but then it just doesn't even make any sense. Like if there is a God and he is like powerful, why would he do something as illogical as just to create stuff and then go walk away? You know, it's
don't
hard for
understand.
me to even entertain that.
I don't understand why a God would need to have a purpose. He could have just like made it. It could have just like scratched his armpit or something. Then just like a whole universe came out and he moved on his way. Like I don't see why there would need to be a God with purpose or anything like that. I don't see why that's any more reasonable than a God that just happened to make a universe and didn't care.
Yeah, I guess I can understand where you're
I
coming to
don't
that.
think either of those are reasonable, by the way. I don't want it taken the wrong way.
Oh, that's fine. Well, I guess we'd strongly disagree on this one, but the universe, even if it did unfold the way that atheists say exactly, that seems like it would take a lot of intention to put the various, even like in evolution, because I'm an evolutionist myself. Not a lot of Christians like, but the mechanism to actually
definitely those. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. The mechanism to actually make that come about, like that's a pretty complex stuff that's going on with the amino acids and DNA. To think that just completely happened by itself, like what's the underlying mechanism? I could understand that, like, and to be honest, I'm kind of like maybe that's what God did. He just created this like underlying evolutionary mechanism. Hold on, let me finish. Sorry. He could rewind it back and it might look something totally different, because that's one thing that evolutionists say, that some of this is just by chance. You know, there's weather patterns and other stuff that wind up affecting whether or not a species survives or not. So it could be the case that if God were just to rewind the clock back, maybe there might be totally different life forms. But still, there has to be something. Like, to me, that's not a big stretch to think that there's some kind of mechanism behind that makes it possible. But go ahead.
But the mechanism, I don't understand why the mechanism has to be a thinking mechanism instead of just like the physics of the world. It seems like or of the universe. It seems like you're adding one assumption on top of all of the evidence on evolution. Like, we don't have abiogenesis figured out yet, and so like, but there's no reason why we have to assume that some intelligent being did that just because we can't figure out exactly how abiogenesis happened. But the mechanism of evolution, the scientist, like, I'm not I'm not a genius on evolution. I got like the basic understanding of it, so I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on it. But like the scientists that are experts on it, the majority of them look at the evidence and they just go where the evidence is, and they don't make assumptions for where this gap in their knowledge is. They just go, we don't have this figured out yet. There's no reason why you would rule in God, aliens, Bigfoot, any of those until there's evidence of any of those.
Yeah, I'm not a biologist by any stretch of the imagination myself, but I probably am more in line with like punctuated equilibrium, which is that there's, if I don't know if you'd call it a God or just the DNA sequence, that there's planned there's planned jumps that would happen somehow. And I said, I don't really know. It is a bit confusing as even if you just to take the literal translation of the Genesis, it's not entirely clear, what's going on, because there's multiple different ways to interpret it. It seems a little bit awkward that there's multiple creations, that it says that life comes out of the sea. There's multiple different things. So I certainly do not believe in like this happened in 6 days. That to me is a really, that's not a logical assumption for me to read it.
I have a hard time cleaning out my garage in 6 days, let alone in a universe.
There you go. All right, so let's see. Actually, going into five, do you feel that you have been blessed to not have undergone some traumatic religious indoctrination? Um, and start off there. And I do want to say something myself is that I believe it was Oz. Yeah, we had mentioned Oz of the Atheist Round Table, and I was in a one of his discords, and he was talking about how he felt he was really upset that he had been so heavily and religiously indoctrinated, and that's one of the reasons I guess why he's so strongly atheist. But
I'm sure
I
there's
said,
other reasons than that. It might be why he's so strongly anti-theist, but being atheist doesn't. Excuse me. Being atheist, I doubt, is because of the indoctrination, but some of the anger towards it, maybe.
no, I'm specifically talking about the anger, but I said something,
And
and
I don't
then
know. Real quick, I don't know if he's actually angry. I don't know Oz. I don't want to sound like I'm calling him an angry
no,
guy.
he was saying that he wished. Okay, he compared himself to the I guess the other guy who's Pasta Mike. He said, "I wish I would have never have gone through that because it's made me like I guess just more angry at them for doing that." Whereas like it can be really traumatic. I mean, I could tell you this: my mom extremely Pentecostal, and some of my childhood was absolutely terrifying because she was talking about stuff like the end of the world and like Ebola and everybody getting wiped out. I mean, it was pretty dang traumatic. At Y2K, she built like this little small bomb shelter, like in her house. Like she was prepping. She was like doomsday prepping. So I understand. Like I didn't want anything to do with religion for a really long time, but um, but I told him in there. I said, you know, Oz, I have like the exact opposite situation because I've I've had to take a step back and say, God, knowing the stuff that I've done, like as an atheist, as a non-believer, was just extremely. We're talking about extremely rock style, like living immorality, like prostitutes, drugs, partying all night long. You know,
So far, I
some
haven't heard
really
anything wrong, though.
well. Okay, um, maybe if you take a trip over to the Philippines and you'd see some of the conditions of human trafficking, you might
Well, if it's
think
if it's
you
if it's
might think a
well,
little bit differently
like
like that. But
prostitution on its own, I don't think there's anything wrong with sex work.
yeah,
But people forced into it, that's where
yeah,
there's an
sure.
issue. So, like, you got to
Anyway,
expand upon that a little bit.
yeah.
Sorry, I
Anyway,
interrupted you.
yeah. Anyway, but anyway, alcoholism. I'm not sure if you think that's okay, but alcoholism did quite a bit of damage in my life, and I've seen it destroy quite a bit of other people's lives. So I have seen the firsthand consequences of that, as our church did run a rehabilitation center for men with families who had substance abuse issues. So yeah, it's pretty bad. But moving along, um, I've had to take a step back and say I'm actually grateful that I've gone through the things that I have, being divorced from my wife, being remarried, being an alcoholic, waking up in my own vomit and getting into accidents and losing stuff. I actually have to be really grateful for that because emerging from that and being a sober and no longer a gambler, a compulsive gambler, all that stuff, it's made me very empathetic to people who are in those situations. So I'm just curious if you could enlighten me about that, not getting indoctrinated. If you think that that's like been an advantage, or yeah, do you feel like you dodged a bullet?
I definitely feel like I've dodged a bullet. I like you say all these bad things that happen in your life because I don't think
Mhm.
it can be attributed to atheism. I could say that could be attributed to
I didn't see.
like I'm just saying like
Mhm.
I've been atheist my whole life. I think I'm a pretty good guy. For the most part, I have good friends. I definitely went through an a-hole phase, but when I was younger. But I think I attribute that more to me being
Oh, we
younger
all do.
than me being an atheist. Uh, yeah,
If
I
you're in your
don't, I
early
don't
20s, it's gonna happen.
yeah, and I don't have. I know a lot of atheists that because they were so heavily indoctrinated, they even though they logically don't think there's a hell, they're terrified of it.
Mhm.
I'm a metalhead. I look at like Satan and hell as like mascots and like cool fiery backdrop to my music. I don't think of it as anything scary because I never had the indoctrination to ever believe it.
Uh-huh.
It's good for horror movies. So it's you said blessed at first. I feel weird about that.
I said what?
You said, do you feel blessed to not have
Oh,
gotten
blessed, fortunate.
indoctrinated? And yeah, I only say blessed when somebody sneezes, and that's like the closest I got to indoctrination. Is when people sneeze, I'll still say bless you. But I definitely I'm glad I wasn't indoctrinated because I feel like it's kept me open, my mind open to where the evidence is leading instead of answers that I'm supposed to be going by.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. In my atheism stage, that was that was crazy because it's like I would try to shake what, if you don't know what the Holy Spirit is or what Christians say when they say blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, it's basically where you get to like a stage where you no longer care like one way or the other. And I'll give you one example. Like I mentioned the Philippines, but through some really bizarre circumstances, like literally I got forced into this. I got forced to get a prostitute. And it's like, I just say this, I'm not going to justify one way or the other, but I'm kind of agree more with like Holland's model where it's just like legalize it and just put it over here. But I got literally forced to do it. I walked out of there like almost throwing up. And I went to the Philippines later on because it went from that to like coming on a full-on addiction, you know? Like we're talking about like visiting 2-3 times like a week. Like bad. And so sex tourism is like a big deal in the Philippines or in Thailand. And I went there, and even while I was literally like having sex with the prostitute, and I'm like, all of a sudden I got really convicted about what I was doing. Like, oh God, this is not right. And I was drunk off of my ass, and I wound up leaving like right in the middle, and I wound up spending my time there doing like working in the slums and stuff, like volunteering amongst the people because I felt so bad about what I was doing. But I worked really hard to like try to shake that conscience that I had about morality and stuff. But I wasn't ever really able to do that as an atheist. But I really wanted to, though. That's the thing. So I understand how it can like, it's just right there and you want to get it out of your mind, but it's always there. So.
I mean, like I said, I don't think if somebody's in prostitution, they're forced to do it. I think it's wrong. Some people have more addictive personalities, and they can't moderate drinking and stuff like that. You need to get help. I always am hesitant on people that need to go to a higher power for help, though, because there is like I read a lot of rock memoirs because again, metalhead, and so many of them go and find God to get over their addictions, and they're going then in the course of the memoir they've gone into rehab and found God like 7 times. So like I'm hesitant to say finding a higher power does it. People can find what works for them. I'd hope they find a secular way of getting out of it. But if you're free of your addictions, I would never say like stop believing in God right now unless you had some way of unless you found a secular way of getting past your addictions. But I do believe everybody could find a secular way of getting past them. But I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't tell you how to handle your life.
I mean, that's interesting. I interviewed another atheist, and he said, like, my higher power is myself. I was like, wow, that's an interesting look. I honestly do know this, that I think humans are capable of a lot more than they possibly even can conceive about thinking about. Like, it's not even in people's conscious really what they're capable of doing. But on the other hand, you do understand some realities. Yeah, you talked about addictive personality. That came out with sex, with gambling, with I was never a drug addict, but I feel like this, I never passed up an opportunity to do any drug that was ever presented in front of me. So But it was more just like partying, it was more like out partying and getting whatever. But
it's funny.
that,
I'm the
hold
atheist
on,
here. Go ahead.
let me finish that pick up right after, because I didn't finish the thought I wanted to say, but
Sorry.
that there are people who just are not going to be able to find that inside of themselves, whether there might be chemical imbalances or whatever. And but that was an interesting thing that you talked about going through like 7 times, because even in our rehabilitation center that we had here, a lot of those guys took many times of coming in and out to finally get their lives on track. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm the atheist here, and I've probably smoked pot 3 times in my life, and it wasn't until I was 23 where I tried it. Despite the fact, because of my voice, my dad thought I was on drugs and had me drug tested in high school, and all my friends told everybody else there that I was going to jail for drugs.
Oh God! Did you have longer hair?
No, I have a personality and a voice. I'm trying to break the monotone, but I've been called monotone most of my life. And I guess I just sound, and I guess I have a sense of humor of a stoner without actually being a stoner.
Yeah. Believe it or not, this scalp used to support dreadlocks, and I used to like wear my clothes backwards, like Criss and Cross. I'm not sure if you remember them, but I used to try to rap, cut them. Crisscross, they always used to wear their clothes backwards. No?
You said you used to rap. That's outside of my genre. If they're not holding the guitar, I don't listen to it.
I know. I'm all alternative these days, but back in the day, it was like Tupac, Biggie. Like I just grew up on that stuff,
I know those names at least, but I don't.
Yeah, I know. So the other part of that is that, do you feel like you have been denied some of the awe and wonder that these have?
No,
that's a genuine. That isn't like a gotcha question. It's a genuine question.
I didn't feel like it was a gotcha question. Don't worry about it. I assume a lot of theists do think that we're missing out on the awe, but like I was saying before with my science fiction book analogy, was the fact that all this has happened and I happen to exist and I'm able to witness this, and I'm able to witness stars and galaxies and even just like movies. I don't think I'm missing out on awe, because I feel plenty of awe in the world. I honestly, I'm not trying to be a smart mouth here. I don't see what adding a god has to do with seeing awe in the world.
Crash the part. Okay, that's fair enough. Very compelling. And thank you very much, Crash That Party. Yo, Isaiah, when did you start doing live shows? I always have to give very special thanks to this person. We call him Marshmallow. It's a transgender person who's in the process of transitioning.
I think most of them prefer, like I listen to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. A lot of them prefer just trans. I'm hearing. So instead of going transgender, most of them seem to prefer trans. I could be wrong, but I listen to the Transatlantic Call-In Show a lot, because I try to stay up to date on those issues. And just saying trans seems to be the way that they refer to themselves.
I definitely know that they don't like transsexual, because person. Right?
I did not say that.
No. That person specifically had to correct me like 10 different times, because I was continually saying transsexual, and he's like, it's transgender. And I'm like, dude, I know, I'm trying. And so now they're in the process right now. And anyway, I always got to give a big thank you to that but how do I say it right now? That she's a transgender woman. Let's just say that. Yeah. She said
they usually say like trans woman or something like that is the way it usually is, because you could be cisgender, you could be transgender. So usually, like, I'd say I'm a cis white guy, and like she could say she's a cis woman. I didn't need to add the white guy. I just usually say that.
She's a transgender woman who's in the process of undergoing. Anyway, the point being is that they've done a lot to really help open my eyes to patiently and sometimes impatiently, sometimes getting upset with me, but asking maybe questions or too many questions. But they've done a lot to help me out. So anytime that they're coming on or I have an opportunity, I give a thank you there. So let's see. I want to transition. What's another word I could use for transition? That sounds bad now after talking about that.
Let's move on.
Yeah. So I guess this is one area I'm gonna do a little bit of pushback on you for, because I was watching a podcast that you did with Objectively Dan.
Truth Wanted.
And Truth Wanted. How long have you known that guy by the way?
Oh, I only met him like 10 or like an hour before that show.
Really?
I've been a mod on his on the Truth Wanted Facebook group for like 2 years, but I hadn't actually spoken to him until like an hour
Really?
before that.
Wow. And just out of curiosity, he was a Christian who got, I guess, converted by Anthony Magnabosco. Is that right?
No, he wasn't converted. It's just like a pivotal point in his deconversion from I can't remember what religion, but it was definitely some version of Christianity. It was some version. I didn't want to say the exact. I don't know the exact one.
Yeah.
But he'll even say that was a stepping stone. That's not. You didn't like right there go like, oh, you made some good points. I'm done. I'm done with my guy, because I don't think any argument takes you off right there then and there. Like even if they're making compelling points, it's gonna stick around with you, but you're not gonna automatically change your mind on something that huge.
I believe you said in that talk, because you're in the context of aliens, you were like, some of these talks you might have to have like 20 times with people.
Yeah.
And I feel like Marsh took that approach with me. They were willing to hear me out for 15 talks that we had, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2 hour, sometimes like F you, you're asking too many questions, I'm getting off here in 30 minutes. So but speaking of Jews, you mentioned that you were a Jew, and right now we're doing an anti-Semitic. Well, we help out this anti-Nazi. He's a former Nazi. His name's Jeff Scoop. He ran a Nazi organization for like 25 years, but he got deconverted by a guy by the name of Daryl Davis. Are you familiar with Daryl Davis?
Yeah, I'm aware of him. I think you brought him up in a couple of your interviews.
Yeah. Well, the whole podcast is based off of that, just sitting down and having respectful dialogue. And some people I've talked to 4 or 5 times, and I don't think that Isaiah Perez has the power to do like anything as far as convincing you of one thing or the other, because it really comes down to, there's a lot of people in church who maybe they're somewhat convinced or somewhat not convinced, but they're there for their family and they're there to like make people happy for societal reasons or whatever. And unless you're finding God like on your own terms, and it's just going to be something fake. And I personally don't want to contribute to that. It's like, I would rather be a light that I've, tell about my story, about my progress. And we're probably going to touch on a little bit of this, my experience with the supernatural after this question. But it's like, if I'm trying to debate you or trying to argue with you or thinking that I'm going to beat you in a debate and then you're just going to become a Christian or whatever, that's not a really realistic way of thinking, So, and I'm going to tell you why. I have something further to say on that. But for now, I will let you answer that question. Is if we're going to, so
I don't think I got a question yet.
Yeah, no. I'm getting to, but the point is that you had mentioned like, you're like, why is it Good Friday? I wonder if Jesus was giving like a thumbs up like on there. And I can actually laugh at that because I have like a really irreverent sense of humor. And whenever I was in Bible college, like, I would laugh at stuff in class that a lot of people thought was really disrespectful. But point being is that you've heard this concept like normalizing atheism, correct?
Mm-hmm. I think there's somebody that goes by that on Facebook, actually.
Yeah, actually, I think that's Pasta Mike, by the way. I think that's Oz's partner. But anyway, the point being is that if atheism is going to get normalized, like, do you think that atheists should, as just a general rule, adopt like some of the abusive and like really sacrilegious things that you're just going out of your way to try to be offensive and hurtful to people who like this is at the core of our lives, right?
Here's the thing, and I knew this is what you're going to ask when you said you had a problem on Truth Wanted. I think ideas are all up for mockery, and I understand that. I understand that some people take them to heart, and some people like you can take a joke on that. I think normalizing atheism means that we can poke fun at things that seem goofy or don't make sense to us, and that's not to me. That's not an attack on Christians. I have a lot of Christian friends. I like a lot of theists. I don't think that just because you have ideas that I find goofy or worth making fun of, that they're bad people. I will call the beliefs, and I'm sorry, I'm I'm not going to swear, but I'm going to say something that you might find objectionable.
This
I
one?
can find the belief stupid without thinking that the person themselves is stupid in any way, because everybody has their blind spots on areas where
Sure.
they're not using skepticism, or they're not applying like the same epistemology towards this area of the life where they are in every other part of their life.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
I know a lot of Christians that are smarter than me, so I'm in no way
Yeah.
saying that because you have a belief that I find dumb, that you're dumb. But I do think that I can make fun of the beliefs without making fun of the people. And if you think that if they take that personally, that's kind of on them. Like, I understand the only way I can say I kind of screwed up with that comment is I'm not used to doing the call-in show, and we're supposed to be getting the theists to call us. So that I'll say one tiny caveat, that probably wasn't the right venue for that joke. Although I did think it was funny, and I had a caller call in and say that. So it wasn't the right venue for that joke. But other than that, I don't think it's wrong to make those kinds of jokes.
So I saw this other one where like Jesus has these holes on his hand, and like he's putting his eyes over someone, and the guy's like, Jesus is behind him. So or these Romans are like they're flying Jesus, and they're like, this is the worst kite in the world. Or probably the worst one I saw was like this guy was literally having sex with Jesus like on the cross, and he says, well, that's what I call getting nailed to a cross. Right. So the point being in that is that if you want to be like, a lot of atheists complain that they're like either abused themselves by Christians or whatever, or like in society, I'd say like it's pretty hard to be like an open atheist running for a political office. So if you want like all of these things, it seems like that would be like a good first step. Just say, hey, we agree. I don't care one way or the other if you agree or disagree with me. It doesn't affect my experiences one way or the other, you know? I mean, I'll just say this. I go back to America sometimes, and I'll tell people about my experience going to dozens of countries, and it doesn't even like compute into people's minds. Like, people think I'm just making stuff up. Like, because before, when my cousin was telling me about like South Korea and traveling around the world, it didn't make sense to me, you know? So if I were to tell you about my time overseas or my experiences with God, and you're like, oh, I don't believe you, or that doesn't make sense, it doesn't affect me. Just in the same way as like, if I don't believe something about a transgender person, it shouldn't affect the transgender person. Like, that person is having their individual experiences that they know is real to them. So it shouldn't matter what I think one way or the other. Or if a gay person, we talked a little bit about this, I'm I used to call it pro gay marriage. I'm personally against gay marriage, but I don't believe in legislating that. I wouldn't vote for that because I believe people have individual lives and their rights, you know?
Yeah,
you can weigh in. You can disagree. You're not here to agree with me.
I know. I was just waiting for you to
go ahead.
Stop, because I didn't want to talk over you. I do think people should try and look into the evidence and change their mind when they're wrong on these things. Mm-hmm. Like, trans people are who they claim to be. It's not just like their experience. It's just like, I'm a man. I'm a cis man. Mm-hmm. Somebody could be a trans man. They are, either way, they are still men, or if they're trans women, it's still a woman. It's not just their experience. It's a fact.
They are. Watch yourself. Huh? You said they are still a woman. You said it. You said it.
I said it's a fact that they're still women.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I was not called. You threw me off in a weird part of my sentence.
You did it. You did it to me at the beginning. So we're even. Okay. I told you, sometimes there's delay, and there's many times I have conversations with people, and I'll listen through it again. I'm like, they're making points I didn't even understand at the time, because I sometimes get so caught up in the moment that I'm not really, and it's not that I'm intentionally trying to like not hear what's going on correctly, but it just happens, you know?
Yeah, so. I would just look into the evidence, and all the evidence shows that they are who they say that they are. Mm. Gay marriage, I can appreciate that you're not voting against it. That's like the least amount that you can do, but they're great people. The fact that
my aunt's gay, I didn't say they weren't.
The fact that your Bible, you're Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that your Bible has areas in it that condemn them. that has very little. I think that matters very little. There's a lot of theists I know that can justify it somehow. I personally don't care about them just
Well,
justifying it through the Bible. I'd rather people just let people be who they want to be and be able to like not condemn it morally. But if you're not doing anything against it, I'm not going to like condemn you personally. It's just like something that it rides up on me a little bit when there's judgment on them for being who they are, but it doesn't make you a horrible person. I can't say that as long as you're not hurting gay people for being who they are or voting against their interests.
well, I've told you about that. The guy Ryan Calhoun. There's another guy who's gay in the NFL, and his name is Sarah Tualo, and he started a nonprofit called Hate Is Wrong, and it's an anti-bullying for LGBT plus youth. It's one of the 5 organizations we support here, and I'll give you the option for a donation to them, or I'll tell you about the other 4 ones. But regardless if I agree or disagree, whatever, you're telling me that I should adopt. You're telling me that I should adopt your way of thinking here. So I have a view that's different than yours, and I respect your way of thinking. Just like this transgender person, Marshall, they know privately because of our discussions, I'm not personally for this, but if anyone tried to hurt that person, if anyone try to physically attack them, or if they're doing so online, I'm going to stand up to that. That's not right. But just people should be respected where they are. And as I told you, I have an aunt that's gay. I have several cousins who are gay, so several friends who are gay. So,
sorry, I'm interrupting.
Good.
I can't say I'll respect your right to believe what you want, but I can't say I respect your opinions on that kind of thing. That's where I'm at. I don't care, and that's fine. But like I said, as long as you're not hurting them, and it's just like internalized horrible thoughts, in my opinion, that you're having. Mm-hmm. It's not you're not somebody that I'd be fighting up against all the time. We might be butting heads in opinion here, but if you're not going against people's rights and you're doing your best to treat them with respect,
sure.
I can't say that I would. I can let it go. I don't know how many people in those communities could let it go, but I'm not personally affected by it. So maybe that's why I'm in a privileged area where I can let it go. But you can't expect.
Well, you're straight. So. You're straight and cisgendered.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we live. Here's the other thing too. I've changed a lot while living overseas for 10 years. That's going to change your mindset totally. So I've changed a lot over the last 10 years. As whenever I just lived in America, I used to be like obnoxiously left wing. Now I'm more moderate, but. Because you have the certain views you have right now, doesn't mean you're going to have them for the rest of your life. Because I've changed my mind on lots of things. Actually, being a father, you're not a father yourself?
No.
Okay. Hopefully you will someday. But you got a dog. I think you got a German Shepherd, right?
It's actually my roommate's dog, so I can't claim that.
By the way, what is your job? What is your day job?
I do cash posting for like hospice and home care. It's kind of like I don't help people out. Like I don't help patients out personally, but I help them out with the money side. It's not that exciting.
My brother actually just got approved for that. He was a soda-aholic, and he had a diabetes. He had to whack off his leg. And just this week, he was telling me that he got approved for that. So, but anyway, so we are going to close off with something a little bit supernatural. I'm going to tell you what happened to me in the Philippines, and about my experience. And I'll let you critique or ask some questions. But this is pretty crazy. You ready for it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I told you what I went to the Philippines for. Very nefarious reasons. Maybe you don't consider it nefarious, but I do. But while I'm there, as I told you what was happening, I was literally having sex with this prostitute, and I got like this conviction on myself. One of the reasons why is because I was just having sex with so many people that I didn't know if I had AIDS or not. And I was kind of just too afraid to go and check. because I was almost certain I had something, because it's not really possible to sleep with this many women and not get something. But I was like, I just thought if I did have something, I could be just infecting this woman right now. So I just stopped, you know? And anyway, I wanted to spend my time. In the slums. I gave away all my clothes, all my toiletries, I even gave away my shoes, gave away all the money that I had. My watch alone was like $300. But anyway, I went to the airport and I tipped the taxi driver the rest of my money. And as soon as I got to the cashier thing, they're like, you have to pay an exit fee, which some really poor countries like the Philippines or like Turkey, they'll do that to you to make some like money right before you go out. Turkey is like $25. It was only like $8. It wasn't even a lot of money, but I had given away all my money. Okay. And so when I told them, they're like, well, if you don't play this, you can't leave. And so I'm like, oh God, I know I have my money. I know I gave it all away. They wouldn't accept my debit card, and they wouldn't accept. I asked them if they had an ATM. They're like, no, there's nothing. So I asked all the passengers. Everybody just gave me the cold shoulder and boarded. And then I realized in the last 5 minutes that I'm going to miss this flight because I offered them like my digital camera and like $100 to let me catch that flight. They're like, nope, if you don't pay this money, you're not getting on. So I looked at all my bags, and my bag was completely empty because I'd given away, as I said, I literally even gave away my shoes. I just bought some flip-flops down there. So I'm like, well, I'm going to miss this flight. I'm like, it's probably going to cost me $1,000, but I'm like, sorry, I got plenty of money. I put my backpack on and I took one step like that, and God spoke to me. And he said, look into your bag one more time. And I'm like, I don't know, because I'm an atheist at the time. And I'm like, I don't know where that just came from, but I'm like, I know there's nothing in my bag because I've just looked like for 5 minutes. I know nothing's in there. So I unzipped the zipper, and there was exactly one note and one coin. That was the amount that I needed to take that flight. And I jumped up. I thought, where did that come from? But I'm like, okay, if I don't catch this flight, like I got to get it right now. Literally jumped up, paid it, ran across the airport, and made it just on. I mean, I wish you could have saw the staff's face, because they were just like they knew what had happened. But anyway, I just got on, and as I sat there, I'm like, oh my God, I freaking know that God exists, because I know he just spoke to me, and I know beyond any reasonable doubt that was not in there. But when I got onto that plane, I went right back to the same way I was. Like, I went right back to my alcoholism and womanizing and stuff. That didn't change anything. So this is why, like what I was telling you, like, it doesn't matter if you get personally convinced about something, acting on that and living your life out in actual consistently is something totally different, which I think a lot of people in churches don't do, you know? So, is that a crazy story?
Have you ever looked for something over and over again, looked in the same spot, and then randomly found it later?
The exact amount?
That doesn't matter. That's a coincidence.
You think that's a coincidence?
I think that's a coincidence. I've also had auditory hallucinations. Like, I've
Really?
heard somebody say my name before. I've heard like somebody like whisper something in my house. I don't attribute that to supernatural or to a god. I know human brains are fallible. You don't even have to have like a mental disorder to hallucinate something. And the fact that you search something over and over again and miss it, when you're stressed, you can miss stuff. I've definitely had almost that same scenario, except for the exact amount kind of thing. That doesn't make me believe in any kind of supernatural thing. I find that a big leap, because even if you heard the voice and somebody put something in there that equaled the exact amount that you needed, how do you go from that to God? How do you know it wasn't like a good Samaritan passed by and just like having to stuff it into your backpack? How do you know aliens didn't do it? Like, I have a hard time finding the beeline from A to B on how that equals God, even on the somehow chance that it was supernatural, which I don't think it was. I don't know how you go to God after that.
Yeah, you know what? I I think it was very convenient for me not to believe in God. I think because when I look back now, I think I was like maybe like 26 at the time. So this was like 14 years ago. It's a long time ago. I've been a believer now, actually like 5/16, next about 3 weeks. Yeah, it will be 8 years that I became a believer. So I literally forced myself to forget that. But
Or did you remember it differently later because memory is fallible and you can make a small story turn into something bigger without even doing it on purpose? Because me and my friends, we have a different. We were both there for this scenario when in Vegas,
remember different,
and we have a different we've argued over this exact scenario, and both of us think that it happened this way. He thinks that I made an idiot of myself with the woman, and I think that the woman just walked away. Everybody else is probably going to side with him on that because I was very capable of making myself look like an idiot. But I feel like I just said hey, and then she walked away, and he says that I like made like some big show, and she walked away. It's like memory's fallible, and I feel and so like the fact that a story that you could have had like an audio hallucination, you could have had somebody just say why don't you double check, and they could have been behind you, or any kind of reasonable explanation, and then it could have turned into a bigger story over time. I find that so much more reasonable than a gut. I'm not saying that I'm right on any of that either, because that if I was saying that, I'd have to prove that I'm right about that. But I think the time to believe something is when you've actually proven something, and you have way too many explanations, in my opinion, to go straight to God on that one.
Any chance you've ever read the book The Invisible Gorilla? I believe I mentioned it with Kenneth. I'm not sure. It was either Kenneth or Leonard. He's Leonard.
It doesn't matter who you mentioned it to. I haven't heard it.
So actually, just anyone watching, I'm going to post a link to that book here. I have it in a drive if anyone wants to download that for free. But what it is like it shows how fallible our mind is, and there's something called the Mandala Effect. Any chance you've ever heard of that?
Yeah, I know the Mandela Effect. I hang out around conspiracy theorist areas and on the internet.
I
love that.
Yeah, because they actually made a movie about that. It's called the Mandela Effect, but it's actually, if you just think for a second, why they use Mandela, it's because Mandela was in prison for like 27 years. So when he got released, a lot of people were like, man, I thought that dude died. Like, I thought he was dead. How is he getting out of prison? But if you think about it, it's like most other, big black leaders like that, like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King, they were like killed. So people just made that, you make that connection. He's killed.
People reference to a movie where they saw some political leader's wife crying over a black leader's name. I can't remember the exact movie, but I actually listened to a podcast that kind of went into debunking this stuff. And it's like they were remembering a funeral from a movie that came out around the same time that he went to prison. And so they conflated those two in their memory because memory's fallible.
So I will say this, that if you read that book, which I mentioned it, Tim, that's probably number one in my epistemology. That one, Freakonomics, and Outliers. Kenneth had mentioned that book, Outliers. But those three, it's like, it really shows you how the knowledge that you think that you have, as you're just talking about memories, those can be really frail. And very frequent times we take two memories and combine them into one. Or like, I swear I've seen some episodes of I've seen like some Star Trek or whatever. And like, I swear I saw that exact thing happen in Star Wars. And I'm like, it talks in there that like you make some kind of connection and you think one will. It's amazing because that book it ends off and is like, look, we're not here to answer every question. We're just making you aware of the fact that you have a lot of these gaps in your perception and other people have gaps in their perception. We've given you the tools to find them. And after I read that book, it was so shocking how many times there were events that I remembered that objectively I found out couldn't have happened that way. Or he talks in there about like 9/11 and him and like his co-author like had totally different recollections of where they were on 9/11. So that's just an example right there, So.
Yeah, and there are more people that claim to remember themselves being in Woodstock than could have actually been in Woodstock. People's memories suck. That's why I would need, if something supernatural happened, I would need multiple somebodies be able to verify exactly what it is that happened. And I could never just go on my own personal experience, even if like the craziest thing in the world happened. Mm-hmm. I would need some way to investigate it. Do you have
Absolutely.
any way to investigate the story that happened? Like, did you find a way to rule out like the mundane?
You know what? I'm not telling you that so you could believe me. I'm just telling you about something that happened. Obviously, even if I were to convince you that were true, that's not going to change anything for your life. Like, if that's going to make you seem like God's doing an absurd, obnoxious miracle in my life when he could be helping starving children. I would rather God help a starving child than to do that. I'm just telling you what happened. You know what I mean? I'll convey what happened, and it's.
Oh yeah, and I believe you believe this is how it happened. I'm not even calling you a liar at all. I'm just wondering if you did any way to investigate to exclude the mundane. I don't like even if you did and it doesn't meet my standards. I'm just wondering if you tried to rule out God by any of your standards.
But I will tell you this: that is obviously a story I wouldn't tell anybody, and I didn't tell anybody about that. It's so embarrassing. You know what I mean? Especially now I have a daughter, and to tell my daughter that I once had a prostitution addiction, that is, to put that out in the ether is so utterly hard for me to do. You know what I mean? Because I'm such a different person than what I was back then. But so really, this is my alcoholic stage. This is like a lot of internal hurt. That was a lot of depression, a lot of suicidal thoughts, a lot of sleepless nights, insomnia, OCD, things like that. Things that I've dealt with. But obviously, this is not something I was telling people. So whenever I became a Christian, so when he spoke to me on that day, audibly told me things in my life. And I know, again, where exactly your mind goes to as a skeptic, but we could maybe unpack this one later on. He wound up using other people and other circumstances immediately after to confirm what he told me. So that's like external stuff happening. But, all that, he could have materialized $1 billion in my pocket or bank account. None of that would have made any difference unless he hurt the actual internal hurt side of Isaiah Perez, which he did. So that would all be irrelevant if he parted the Red Sea in front of me. Unless he was actually able to change my life, then all that was meaningless. But do you have any last thoughts before we close out here? We're at 1 hour, 30 minutes.
No, I think we're pretty good here.
You enjoy yourself?
Yeah, I actually did. I definitely, I wasn't sure about coming on here, honestly, because
Why is that?
Well, I've never done a theist stream before, so it was interesting. We definitely had some disagreements, but I think it was cordial, and I think it was a good conversation overall.
I don't agree with myself half the time. It's a toss-up whether or not I agree with myself or whether or not I'm acting consistently within the Bible. You could literally just follow me around with a coin and say, how consistently are you living up to your own views? And maybe you just toss that thing whether or not I'm going to act in a way that I know is right. So I don't always agree with myself, and I don't act consistently inside of what I believe inside the Bible. That's why I'm willing to cut people slack. I'm willing to say, hey, no one has to get everything figured out perfectly. No one's going to be have all the answers, act totally consistent. I'll be the first to admit I'm the biggest hypocrite that I know. So there's that. So I just have a lot of charity, and I know where I've came from, and that just goes back to the question I was asking you about where I came from. I'm glad that I went through that because it's given me charity, it's given me compassion and empathy for people. So, but I do thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
These podcasts doesn't exist to agree everywhere, but it's to say we can agree to disagree, and we can still have respect, like you disagree with what doesn't affect me at all. You know what I mean? I know what I experienced, that's what counts. I know what my life was before that. I know what my life is now. So that's what counts. But I do want to say really quick, the 5 nonprofits we're supporting. We've already mentioned the anti-LGBT one. We have a Israeli, Jewish, Palestinian former terrorists working with families of slain civilians Together for Peace. I love that one. The organization that helped the Nazis de-radicalize. There's that one, and then single mothers here in South Korea. It's really, really hard for them. And then the last one is in North Korea. That's something that's really big in my heart because I've been to North Korea a few times. So, they bring attention to that. But any of those sound interesting to you?
I'd have to look into them myself. I'm never one of those like blanket kind of like give kind of person. But I do believe in giving to organizations when you believe it. Like I gave to Black Non-Believers just earlier this month because I believe in what Mandisa Thomas is doing over there.
Mandisa? Anyway, can you just pick one of those 5, though, that we'll make a donation to on your name?
I like I said, until I investigate it personally, I can't give any. You
can get back to it then. They're on our website, and you've got Hate Is Wrong, Kumfa, that's the South Korean one. The Beyond Barriers, that's the one where we're doing one with a guy from Israel. He's a Jewish leader, rabbi down there, and he's coming on with the ex-Nazi guy. So we have that in the pipe works right now. We also did a talk with him and a Muslim guy by Khalil Allah. He goes by Khalil Allah. So very respectful conversations. We had some very different ideas on things, but we sat down and were respectful, Yeah. So that being said, I want to thank you for joining us today at RG Podcast. Don't forget to visit our website at www.rgpodcast.com. Check us out, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And we thank you for joining us today. And if you're not subscribed, please do so. And tell us what you thought about this topic. It was interesting. And we're going to leave you with this video, this outro. And if you could stick around for a couple minutes and just to say goodbye. And here we go.